Welcome to another episode of Meijor League. And in this particular episode, I'm going to be interviewed by a friend of mine to talk a little bit about my entrepreneurial journey and views on business. And so my good friend, David Lutteral, thanks for coming here today.
Don, thank you, mate. Good to be here. So a lot of the things we've been speaking about so far have been just elements that you've discovered yourself through evolving as a person and as a businessman, but you can't do it all alone. I presume that at some points you've received advice from certain people. Have you received? Is there certain elements to that where you remember specifically?
Yeah. Yeah, lots of early mentors like my business partner Jack Cowan in our business was a big mentor in the early days. Another gentleman, his name was Meijor, and he was an early entrepreneur in the industry I was in. And I remember Mike once saying to me, he said, for all the money you'll make in business, he said, the thing that you'll most treasure and remember is the effect you've had on people. And when I was really young, I'd look at this multimillionaire and go, oh, it's easy for you. You're really wealthy. You can say that, you've made a lot of money. But the truth is, as you do mature in life, you do start to realize that the things you actually treasure the most is when people go on and do extraordinary things, and you're sitting back more as a cheerleader now or reflecting on someone in a magazine or newspaper or just even where they are in your own business, and you think, wow, I was there in the early days with this individual, and I feel or I hope that you get that sense that I had an impact on that, maybe that pebble on that skims along the water that you were in that early phase.
Yeah, right.
And that's so rewarding when you see people do exceptional things and way beyond even what you knew they thought they would ever do, but even what you thought they might do. And they just do really, really crazy things. Even outside, they might have started a new business and they do something totally else, but you know that you help to unlock their capability. So, yeah, people are the gifts that keep giving forever if you do the right things.
Just to circle back around to the business side of things again, I mean, the top of any game, whether it's sport, business, whatever the case may be, like no one's perfect. Like Tiger Woods hits bogeys occasionally. Like there's failures. Failures, I'd imagine, in business are part and parcel of anyone in any industry. Talk us through that process, and when you do have a failure or something that doesn't quite work out the way you would have hoped, like not being disheartened to the point where you don't back your own judgment or you don't trust the process of what you're doing. And yeah, that experience of learning and moving forward as opposed to letting that sort of break you down a little bit as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think one of the human traits is people, when something goes wrong, we have this natural instinct to want to say, well, who's at fault and who's to blame and what's the consequence? I think that stifles all the learning, kills all the creativity and really hurts individuals and organizations. Another approach that I really love is when we made a mistake, let's admit straight away, and hey, I was the founder of that mistake. Yeah. And what did we learn and how are we not going to do it again in the sense of the learning, but now how are we quickly moving on? And because when you get a penalized culture, people hang on to it longer. They try to not admit that there's a problem because the downside of admitting there's a problem means you might as well not admit it and keep it going. And so being very, very fast to say, look, this is a big mistake. This didn't work. It doesn't, who's the actual founder of that mistake is less important than what did we all learn and how do we all learn it? And let's quickly move on. We don't need to do a whole court-martial and assassination of characters and stuff like that. Let's just make sure we've really captured this learning. And thankfully, we've now stopped it from becoming even a bigger problem potentially. But society wants sometimes to make scapegoats and penalties and so on. And look, there's certain things that are unacceptable and with safety and so on that needs to be the case. But in most business practice, what I find is that ease of comfort to say, oh, we screwed up, I screwed up, whatever it is. What did we learn? How quickly do we get out of this to move on and make sure we don't keep doing this sort of stuff? And therefore, I've always said, I don't know what it is, but when I go to bed and I wake up, it's normally like it's now a fresh day. I might still carry it in the early phases going to bed, but it's like, oh, so much stress. But there's something that gets released between the night before and the next morning. And I genuinely don't know anybody I have a hate towards in my life. And my grudges would be so irrelevant That it's kind of like, oh, just steer clear of that person, but don't necessarily hold a grudge, right? I just don't need to experience that again over and over with that individual or something like that. But it's not like I see so many people that were going to be like, I hate that person. I hate that politician.
Yeah.
For me personally, once an election's happen, that's now my prime minister, even if it was on the side of politics I voted. And if that person goes to the White House or they're overseas or opening an Olympic event, they're my prime minister.
Yeah.
They're in Australia. I'm really proud of them now, even though they weren't my person initially, because why would you hold a grudge?
Yeah.
You know, like you lost, it was a free election.
Yep.
We're great, lucky in Australia. It's a democracy. Our person got in or didn't get in. Got another 3 years from now, another 4 years from now, we can go after the next person. And I think taking that approach to everything in business is really important, because when you carry all of this pain and anguish and grudges and you start creating rules that start to penalize that, the 1% becomes your 99%. In other words, people who sometimes do the wrong thing and are in the position where they are slanted to do the wrong things, you start to think that that's everybody, and you walk around with dark glasses. Yep. And then you're jaded by all the opportunity in front of you. I could be accused of being an over-optimistic person from time to time. And I was thinking, well, what's that alternative? That it should be a pessimist in life. Now, you need to have people around you for checks and balances, because when you're an optimist, you can often only see the good in things. Yeah. And people need to be pointing out and saying, yeah, but let's not drive over that cliff to get to that piece of a target. So always, as an entrepreneur that with an optimism mindset, could be challenging, questioning culture around you. But there's something in waking up and just like, in my industry, it's sunny. Well, we got a great day. It's raining. Well, we're going to sell more product.
Yep. Yeah, of course.
Tell me where there's a bad day with the weather.
Yeah.
Right.
So within that, you obviously are a great manager of people, and you have to be when you're at the head of any organization. And it's a really interesting point that on that skill and how and I saw a quote from a great athlete, Sebastian Coe, recently, who was who was in charge of the 2012 London Olympics, and maybe by the time this goes to air, be the IOC president. Wow. And he was talking about allowing the great people that you have in your organization to do what they're best at. And take all the elements that will derail them from doing that out of the picture. Yeah. And if you do that well, it actually is self-serving back on you as a great leader as well, if you let them do the job at the task at hand. Yeah. Is that the way you look at the people, the many, many people that you've obviously been involved in your organizations over the years? Yeah. So, one of the what I think is the formulas to success is if you can remove all the physical and mental barriers in business, business can be almost exponential. In other words, we often limit ourselves by what we think and believe. And industries, sports, when there was whatever that is, the 4-minute mile. Is that 4-minute mile, yeah. You can't do it, and then someone does it, everyone does it. Yeah. Not everyone, but enough. But it happened in the next couple of weeks. I think it got broken for the second time. You're right. Exactly. So we live in common think of what's possible, and we limit ourselves by that mentally. And in other cases, it's physical. In other words, that we didn't have enough equipment or asset or tools or ability to invest in more people or remuneration to get the right person. And so if you can find a way to unlock those, it just helps. It's like, imagine a glass tank. If there's a ceiling there, everyone jumps up to the glass tank, but you take that off and then how far can we jump? And so, what I think, I'm often envious of, even in private companies, is that people have the ability, when it's their own capital, to put that even more at risk than, say, in a public company where you have a responsibility to many stakeholders, and there are some genuine barriers. But what you often see with private startups and so on is they're in that phase of anything's possible, and it doesn't always have to cost a lot of money if you just think differently. And but through the power possible of no mental limitations, you see some pretty incredible things happen. Yeah, I still walk into my bookshop every week just to see if the Don Meij book's out yet, which it isn't. But I guess this podcast series is as close as we've come to getting these sort of interactions with you, which is pretty cool. But talk us through about other influence you've had outside just personal experience with other human beings, like books or podcasts, anything which you've lent on over the years that you would. I've noticed you've always got a couple of books sitting around. You're not many, but you've got a couple of books always on the desk at some of your offices.
And today, when I'm in the gym, often it's now ebooks and so on. So there's 3 people I followed for most of my life, and one of them's now passed away. But to me, they're mentors, and I've only met one of them. But I would read constantly, and I'd look for all the literature, and I'd search them. And one of them is Bernard Arnault, who's the founder of LVMH. And when you'd mentioned Bernard Arnault 30 years ago, a lot of people didn't know who he is, and now one of the wealthiest men in the world, because he's an extraordinary retailer and storyteller, and he takes businesses that are modest and turns them into pretty exceptional things.
Yeah.
And whilst it's majority of the time it's luxury, and most of my life I've been in a value business. There's so much to learn still from its retail and how he's created value, and he's an exceptional retailer.
Yep.
Another gentleman is Howard Schultz from Starbucks, and I have met Howard a couple of times. And Howard basically took a free product in America, which was diner coffee in a sense. Like, if you ever watch an American movie, the whole romance of coffee in America is, James Dean in the corner of the cigarette and somebody coming over. As soon as you sat down and they pour a glass of tar into your, a pot of tar into your glass, and it was free. And yet, he created a biggest coffee business in the world for retail coffee, and such immense amount of value. Yeah. And the way he went about how he's done that in so many languages and so many cultures, I think is just extraordinary. And then the other gentleman who has now passed, he passed just a couple of years ago, is Ferdinand Piëch. And Ferdinand Piëch, his mother is the daughter of Porsche, so he didn't inherit the name. Right. I don't know if that's part of it. It's never documented from what I've read anyway. That's the reason why he became the father of the Volkswagen organization is today.
Yep.
But the portfolio of all these brands like, Lamborghini and Bentley and Skoda and Ducati and just incredible brands. And he assembled one of the biggest car companies in the world. And once again, the way he's retailed products of cars, from coffee to luxury brands to motor vehicles, these people have all done exceptional things, built exceptional businesses in retail, and I couldn't read enough about it. To me, they're very inspiring people. I only met one of them, as I mentioned. And then along the way, I've been inspired by people I've worked with. There's been people in our business that you can learn so much from, some geniuses along the way. If you talk about books, I just don't think you can read enough. The benefit of reading a book, in my opinion, is you're having a conversation with the author. Sometimes they're dead.
Yeah.
And you're having all this knowledge imparted with you at the pace you can learn at, and you're having a conversation whether you agree with them or disagree with them. Sometimes you don't agree, and you go, no, that doesn't make sense with me. But anyway, I'm still engaged and enthralled by this storytelling. And what it does, it keeps your mind active and shaping and keeping you thinking fresh. To just constantly on the internet looking at, different articles that are coming out, things like The Economist. I love The Economist.
Do you find that you mentioned it doesn't have to be necessarily stuff you agree with, but with so much information available these days, can you still find a pathway that you can still have a focus regardless of the millions and millions of articles you can now
I do think it's funny. Like often, you'll have a conversation with my kids and the reference will be TikTok.
Yeah.
As the source of knowledge. It's the biggest search engine for young people, I think, today. And so there's a lot of very good content in there and it's real, but there's also a lot of AI content.
Yeah, right.
What's my source of accuracy in this? So for me, especially with business knowledge, when I'm following companies that I might even privately invest in, in the stock market or whatever, trying to get a source of truth that, different analysts you might follow, because you follow analyst reports that are writing about those companies. I learn a lot from those too, because analysts are really smart at breaking down models and viewing in. And sometimes you find an analyst, there was a gentleman I followed for years, his name's John Glass, and he went through three different organizations. And I'd follow him religiously because I really thought what he would often analyze about a business actually was pretty accurate. So I trusted him as a source.
Yep.
When he was covering businesses. And if he was telling me if he was saying to buy, there's a high chance I'd probably go and buy. Because he's a very good analyst. No one has a track record of perfect. People get things wrong. But yeah, I think trying to get trusted sources of truth that you get some sort of credibility from, today's getting harder and harder, isn't it? Some of the AI stuff is so convincing that it can be, can be challenging.
But I've noticed you've like the years I've known you that you've always tried to be at the forefront of whatever that new technology was bringing. You've always got a keen eye on what's next.
Yeah, and a lot of that's also site visits. So, we would do product tours where we're going after certain products. So the future of that product, where's it going? So there's new trends becoming, years ago when fried chicken was becoming fashionable again. There was a time in most of my working career early, fried chicken was considered bad. The word fried was even taken from the word of, large QSR brand. And, but then, with the change where ketonians and, protein heavy people and so on started going around, well, fat's not bad for you. It became a belief of some, I'm not here to espouse any certain health choices, but all of a sudden we could see fried chicken potentially was going to get into trend. And so we did an American fried chicken tour, and we would go all over America studying the future of fried chicken to then find out what the future of, and that was an exact trend that's become real. I mean, chicken sandwiches and chicken tenders is a phenomenal business. To even just the way that people engage with, like one of the best trends in the last 2 years with fried chicken has been mukbang, which is a Korean word. And it's, with all these fried chicken brands, the internet blows up with people dipping in ASMR and these beautiful sauces that become proprietary to these companies. But anyway, going on product tours has been a really big source of learning, because experiencing it and seeing what you think's real and not real and trying to have a lens as an Australian for the Australian market or other countries, to then tech tours. It's amazing that you can read everything you want, but when you actually go to places like Silicon Valley, parts of China, they've become a little bit touristy now. So sometimes you meet with salespeople and they're sort of giving you a tourist view. Yep. But if there's a way, and members of our team have been very good at actually getting under the covers and meeting actually the people who make the stuff. And they want to talk to us because we're also people who are potentially going to be pioneers with them on that. So between having a pioneering customer and a creator, you get to learn a lot, and their views. And you get to meet some extraordinary people who at the dinner table or at a meeting, like I remember, like a simple example, I remember meeting Dr. Astro Teller from Google X in Sydney, and I was talking about drone robots. He said, Don, that's going to take way longer. Drones will be better. And I was like, well, why? And he said, well, he's an American, and he said, if you shoot a gun, a bullet's going to hit something at ground level.
Yes.
He said, drones, if you fly them above tree level and below helicopters, there's birds. Safest place on the planet. He said, why doesn't golf balls kill people? And he explained very quickly in a mathematical way. And we're like, okay, so now drones is something we should be playing with and looking at, because it was a potential game shifter. But it's extraordinary when you meet people like that. You get that opportunity, and that's an immense source of knowledge to share.
So, I mean, obviously success in business is one thing, but then you've got life. Quality of life, family, and all these sorts of things. So outside of business, how do you define success?
Yeah, well, my wife's very good at reminding me that our ultimate legacy is your children, right? They're your ultimate masterpieces. And so you can't be successful in life if your kids are not happy and finding their ways in life. And so that's an important conversation. And we think about how, I think one of the hard things for a parent of my age is that we sometimes if we're not careful, can overcompensate, and our kids don't get the hard pain, and therefore they don't necessarily get all of the learning. So how do you get this right balance between being a great parent and trying to guide your kids on a future life, but also not over smothering and not letting people pave their own way? You're not happy if your partner's not happy. So how do you create a balance there of what life looks like for them as much as you? I think anybody in any partnership, and a marriage is no different, that's a constant way of trying to find, balance for both of you and what you both enjoy. I love cricket, absolutely love cricket. I'll be sitting in another part of the world trying to come up with some of the most weird apps to get cricket.
Yes.
Love Formula One, love basketball, love tennis. So I love sport. When the Olympics or the Commonwealth Games come around, as you know. Yeah. American football has become a new passion. I wouldn't say I worship that yet, and it's not in my DNA. But, that's another sport that I love to follow as well. And car interest too. Love reading about cars all the time.
Yeah. Inspirations, you mentioned a couple of those ones through business. Who are the people that day-to-day in life inspire you?
Oh, look, there are peers, people that I've worked with, people that have been in the business I work with still there are still inspiring to me, people outside who've left and gone to other things, people I've known around the world in in similar businesses that you get to know through your association of the industry. There's I get inspired in my own family because I think you get some more personal conversations. I think your family is very good at telling you all your weaknesses as well, and in a genuine, caring way. So that can inspire you to be better. When you're a leader, there's a real danger of hubris, in that at a large company you can get carried away with people telling you what you want to hear, and people maybe semi-worshipping the boss in a large group, and having people you trust around you who give you the reality check keeps you very humble, and your family can keep you really humble too, just going, yeah, right, yeah, but you're still my husband or dad or whatever.
Yeah. Do you think that there's the same opportunity or better or worse opportunity for entrepreneurs now as there was, looking at Don Meij circa whatever year it was when you were 16, 17, 18, 19 years old,
I think it's a double-edged sword. I think we now live in a society of the power of possible is you can almost do anything. That the way that the internet's evolved, where AI is evolving, robotics evolving, the intelligence that engineers have brought to society, that literally, diseases are being cured frequently now. 20 years ago, did we think we're going to Mars? That how many rockets get up into the sky right now? That almost anything feels like it's possible, and there are enablers and tools to do that. But I also think that with that, there's an immense amount of competition as well, and that it can look easier than it really is. Often a business idea is the easy part, and then you start to build the business and you realize how hard it still is.
Yeah.
The laws of gravity really kick in. So on one hand, yeah, the internet, social media means that somebody from their garage is more likely to be able to spin up a business than they might have been able to 20, 30 years ago, because the toolbox is there, but they're still going in, and they could also go bust a lot faster because there's so much more competition that's coming constantly. And how do you get longevity, and how do you keep evolving, because the pressures are just faster and speeding up. And legacy companies have to deal with this too. Companies that have got 50 years, 100 years, brands, 30 years, they're constantly being attacked. If you're in the drink business, if you're in the medical business, if you're in the fashion business, there's so many people all day, every day coming up with a twist and a new version and another breakthrough. But then those companies themselves can be easily, as fast as they come up, they can be disrupted just as fast. If things can be created quickly, they can be disrupted quickly too. If things take longer, then it may take longer.
So if you are a young business person that truly believes in a concept or whatever it may be and has a good work ethic, your advice to that person would be that even though it seems like it's almost an impossible competitive scale at the moment, would you tell that young person to have belief in the ability to succeed?
We often say opinion land's one of the most dangerous places on the planet. You can get false positives and false negatives. And what I mean by that is people can all rally around you and tell you got the best idea and it's a dumb idea, and you've got consensus of a dumb idea. On the other hand, you might have a really good idea that genuinely does have the right it that will make it successful, but you meet with enough people going, nah, that doesn't, that's not probably going to work. And then you talk yourself out of it, and yet it could be something. So the best advice for any young entrepreneur is get into data land really fast. And the great things about how a lot of producers are built these days is that you can even sell a product before you've made it. Better to do that than go and buy it and then wonder if people are going to buy it from you.
Right.
Sometimes there's so many pipelines and chains today of systems that means you can create a product around certain characteristics, test it by putting it up into the market, social media, web, and potentially sell things you don't even have yet.
Right.
But you can get. You've got enough. Don't sell snake oil.
Yeah.
You're not a criminal. You got to deliver.
Yeah.
But if you come out and say, these are the 3 things my product will deliver, and you have already figured out before you go and buy it, you can actually sell it. And if you get oversubscribed, you're onto something, right?
Yeah.
But if no one buys it, thank gosh you didn't order it.
Yeah, of course.
You've got the wrong triggers.
Yeah.
So how do you get into as cheap as possible the data land of knowing the knowledge of what you're trying to do? And there are many cheap ways to spin that up, including just straight into social media, where you're pitching things, and then it either resonates by how people are trending with you or listening to you. And the other thing is, don't give up so quickly. It takes time to master the art of something unique. There are very real documented parts in history where people just nail it from day one, and they did something. They just had an insight, and they were right place, right time, and very lucky. But there's more of the people who toiled and toiled and toiled for years, sharpening and sharpening, sharpening, and then they really mastered. And you kind of feel those businesses, when you come across them, the ones that are more sustainable versus the fads. There's a lot of fad type concepts right now where they're here 6 months and they're gone. They're here 3 years and they're gone. And so, there's something about that toil and grind and shaping, and you start to become an expert in that area because you start learning more and putting it out to the customer, to the people who are going to buy your product. They teach you all day, every day. And you'll know if you're an entrepreneur, ultimately, is if you give up too quickly, maybe it wasn't for you. But if you have that burning desire, that burning passion, that relentless pursuit, I think there's a limit for everybody at some point, but overall, you'll probably get to something.
Yeah, it's such a good point you make around that, the access but back when you were starting, you were pretty much limited to the people you could sell pizza to, whereas now you can reach that. For instance, you made me think in a media sense for me, like if I wanted to get a television show up 20 years ago, I had to shoot a full-length pilot and try and sell it to a network, whereas now I can just test certain characters in 30-second TikTok videos just to see what works for a much broader audience.
Yeah, short form video. You've also very competitive because there's a lot. People swipe you in 2 seconds, right?
Yeah.
So there's that. But yeah, grabby stuff that can resonate. You've got a much bigger testing field than you had not too long ago. Yeah.
And looking forward for you,
yes,
an exciting time. You've probably had more sort of scale of opportunity than perhaps you would have had previously with things you could potentially do now. A very exciting time for you.
Yeah.
Can you give us any sort of insight into your space?
Once again, being an optimist, I got a lot of good advice leading into what I might do next. It's just important what you say no to than what you say yes to. So what are things at a point in life that can be fun and exciting, but also can give you purpose? Because they don't always align. You can do things that are fun, but eventually, this was just fun and it's not really got legs. And so to me, it hasn't been, the initial phase is not about how big it is to start with. It's just more going through this journey of, is it something that I think is sustainable? And I'm staying around food because I think food's more sustainable. I could be wrong. Someone watch this podcast in 3 years from now and go, he was wrong. But for all the knowledge I have today, AI will be part of it and robotics will be part of it all. And then people still going to eat. And yeah, there's things like some of the brands that help you lose weight right now from an injection. But people still eat. They might be eating smaller portions, but there's still a pleasure in eating and drinking.
Yes.
And it's one of those sensory things that I don't predict in the near future is going to go away. It's not going to be the Jetsons with that one pill.
Yeah.
That gives you all the satisfaction. So to me, that's something that I'm still very passionate about, and I'm not focused on the size and scale of it today. I'm focused on how proud I would be doing that product, and then see how big you can make it. That's what's most important.
Thank you for including me in this. If nothing else, this podcast has made me very, very hungry talking about fried chicken. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Luttsy. Thanks for participating and for taking this time. It was a lot of fun.
It was, mate.